these devices, the Alienware Area-51 and the Lenovo Legion Pro 7i, have the same Intel Ultra 9 275HX CPU and the Nvidia RTX 5080 GPU. But both have completely different ideas of what the spoiled PC gamer of 2025 is looking for on the move. The Area-51, making a comeback after 5 years, is pulling some serious intrigue with that mysterious steel shade on the outside of it. And that extremely heavy and bulky design makes you think, what kind of serious weaponry is this thing even packing? And then there's the very popular Legion 7, which seemed to improve their recipe with every generation and want to be seen as the all-rounder for anything that the modern PC gamer desires. Naturally, budgets are limited both for consumers and also for manufacturers, so compromises have to be made on both ends. Interestingly, both of these devices are also similarly priced at a whopping 3,800 Canadian dollars, including discounts which both of them have been offering as of late. So, the aliens are back to conquer the Earth. Now, will the Legion army be able to repel them back? Let's dive into the details and find a winner for you. Let me know which one of these devices seem to call out your name the loudest. Just a tiny request, if you find yourself enjoying my content, please be sure to leave a like and do also subscribe so that I can continue to make content like this and bring you perspective about what these devices actually are like to live with. Now, as I mentioned, both of these devices have the fully powered 24-core Intel CPU, that Intel Ultra 9 275 and that RTX 5080 with all 16 gigs of VRAM on tap for both of them. Which, by the way, both of these manufacturers advertise as being fully powered at 175 watts. So naturally, both of these devices are going to be a little chunky to house all of the thermals to keep that power in check. But I think the alien here may have taken it a bit too far. Weighing in at a colossal 3.5 kilos, this is probably one of the heaviest 16-inch gaming laptops by a far mile that has been available to mass consumers. The X16, the device that the Area-51 apparently is seeking to replace, was thinner and lighter at just 2.7 kilograms. I know that's still heavy, but that also housed a quad fan setup, as does this. The topic of lightness was probably never even discussed at any of the Alienware design meetings. Oh, the laptop's too heavy for me. Join a gym, you weakling. Work out, put some muscles on your back. You don't deserve the Area-51. You can't pull its weight? No, you can't pull your weight. That could probably have been part of Alienware's advertising for the Area-51. In comparison, the Lenovo Legion is actually noticeably lighter at just 2.7 kilograms. The Legion is thinner too at just around 1 inch. It feels more densely packed than the Alienware and also has a very functional underbody compared to the Alienware's rather pointless observation window. Now have a guess at how thick the Area-51 is. Nope, it's a whole 30% thicker at 1.3 inches. That is a huge number. In fact, I found empty space within the chassis underneath the primary SSD, for which a spacer was required. Knowing how heavy this is and knowing how thick it is, all I'm saying is this Area-51 better hit performance numbers out of the park. One big achievement for the Area-51 though, 3 SSD slots, all capable of read-write speeds upwards of 10K. And for a 16-inch device, 3 SSD slots is an awesome feature. By the way, quick warning, the 2 secondary SSD slots does not come with any thermal padding or any heat dissipation measure of any sort. At least that was the case for my unit. And it's not like you can apply your own thermal pad on your SSD and that's job done, because the opposite side of the SSD is like a mesh, so it doesn't even work. Good news though, Alienware from its website sells a thermal plate dedicated for both the SSD 2 and SSD slots. Make sure you get those before you decide on upgrading across the board. I do have to say though, when I put both the Legion and the Area-51 next to each other, I can't really tell that the Alienware is all that thicker in comparison. Probably it's due to all the edges being curved. Also, by the way, both devices have upgradable RAM. That is great news. The predecessor X16 did not have that. Apart from that mysterious steel shade on the Area-51, it looks almost soft and swollen and pillowy. One could say, though, is that it's ready to burst at the seams with all of the power that's contained within it. No matter how you see it, it's curves everywhere. Unlike the straight lines, the edges, and the precision cuts on the all blacked out Legion Pro 7i, it actually feels a little inspired by the Legion 9's design from 2024 and 2023, with the rear thermal intake housing raised up to level with the rest of the body. It feels dense, it feels solid, like every atom within it has some sort of a purpose. There's something about the Legion that makes it feel tactical, like it's built from parts of a machine gun or a B-2 stealth bomber. Even the exhausts on the Legion look like giant thrusters on a space battlecruiser. The exhaust design on the Area-51, by comparison, don't look like that. But that is because it has exhaust slits on each side of the device as well. And the Legion does not. And as a result, for the first time, the Legion 7 has no ports on the rear, something that used to define it quite a bit. Now, all the ports are on the left and right hand side. And you know what? I think it's the right move. It gives it an overall cleaner look. And it also means that ports are generally accessible. They no longer have to find icons and lights on the rear for easy access for the user. And I'm so glad to see that Legion brought back the RGB lit logo on the 7 series. They actually dropped that one out ever since the 7th generation. And the logo RGB also has multiple zones within it. That's kind of nice. Both the Area-51 and the Legion have 2 Type-C ports. Configured with the RTX 5080 though, the Area-51 has Thunderbolt 5 support on both of those Type-C ports. And the Legion is still stuck at Thunderbolt 4. Both of these devices have 3 Type-A ports, which is amazing. We usually have ended up with 2. The Area-51 has a full-sized SD card slot, which is US 2. And the Legion doesn't. But the Legion makes up for it by having a 2.5 gigabit Ethernet jack. Personally, I am more drawn to the full-size SD card on the Area-51, especially in the age of Wi-Fi 7. All the USB A and C ports along with the HDMI 2.1 and the power jack are on the rear of the Area-51. Again, clean, but I still have to turn around this heavy casserole dish to find out where which port is. At least instead I get this really neat RGB strip running around the edge of the exhaust. It's very heavily diffused through the housing. Probably one of the most grown-up RGB strips I've ever seen. Gives the Area-51 a more decent, mature look compared to the Legion 7's implementation of the rear RGB lights. That picket fence design is a little bit too much in your face. At first I kind of found that look too tacky. Thankfully, you don't have to use all of the zones and you can just simply turn quite a few of them off. And thankfully, Legion's software allows you to do that with relative ease. So with that, I actually prefer the rear RGB lighting on the Legion. Now, the Area-51 might not have space thrusters on the back, but it does have RGB in its intake vents to warm the cockles of my nerdy heart. Kind of like an homage to Gypsy Danger from Pacific Rim. And I don't mean part 2 of it, that one was horrible. Sure, it looks cool, but the effect kind of wore down for me really quickly. At the surface, the lights might seem a little bit dim, especially when you're sitting at an angle. For you to really look at the full circle, you need to get up and sort of look at it from the top, which is unnatural, right? I also wish Alienware put in some thought on how to best use those lights. For example, if those lights were to change color based on the temperature of the CPU or the GPU, that would be very useful. And I know it is possible because I saw this maybe 5-6 years ago on a Legion nonetheless, when they used to borrow software from Corsair to light up their RGB. Heck, it's very difficult to even configure them with the proper lights through Alienware's Command Center software. And that is actually, I think, Alienware's Achilles heel. And I don't just mean the Area-51. Their Command Center utility software is a joke. What I absolutely hate in a gaming device is crappy software from the manufacturer. Now, the Legion's RGB settings are basic compared to the likes of Asus's ROG Armory Crate software or Razer's Synapse software. But I think Alienware is trying to win some sort of an award for the most rigid, most unfriendly user experience configuration utility thing. The only lighting zones I get to customize are on the keyboard itself. And even there, the effects that I get to choose from are so bare bones. The whole light bar on the rear that you see there is, for the most part, just made up of one zone, and it's not even that color accurate. Now, when I select the rainbow wave setting from the configuration software, the Area-51 shows some potential because you can see that it has so many multiple zones for you to play with. The software is so god awful that I need to select everything, and I mean the logo, I mean the fans, I mean all the keyboards, the trackpad, everything has to go rainbow crazy. And that's like seeing an alien become some hallucinating clown unicorn that poops rainbows. And I don't want that. Their whole configuration utility is literally being run by interns, I think. It's such a pity because these guys can push out some good hardware, but software always lets them down. And that really matters today. Software sells hardware. That's not a difficult concept, guys. Now, I'm a tiny speck of a channel on YouTube, right? And Dell's not going to be taking advice from me on the subject of all of what I'm talking about right now. And if by any chance you agree with me, be sure to subscribe to me so that I can keep ranting about the little things and I can somehow end up playing a tiny role in shaping the next iteration of gaming laptops, which are more responsive to what the gamer actually wants. Now, I'll be honest, when I first unboxed the Area-51, I felt immediately that it was a laptop I was waiting for a very long time. It seemed so different, it felt like a brute. And I was happy to pay the price in terms of the big dimensions, the heavy backpack, all of it. I wanted to marry it and have its babies, at least for the first 30 minutes, I thought so. After which my relationship kind of looked like this. It looked like compromise, doesn't it? Now, when we open the lid on both of these devices, the hinges on both feel pretty solid. Yeah. But after that, the alien takes another step back with a plain and simple IPS display with a peak brightness of a little over 500 nits and a refresh rate of 240 Hz. I mean, there's nothing wrong with an IPS display. It's a reliable workhorse. But the Legion 7, 3 years ago, was sporting a very similar IPS display. Same brightness, roughly the same refresh rates as well. And now it comes with a modern OLED display, which has the capability to manage things like burn-in and all of those disadvantages as well. Like, we've come a long way. It's like what happened to the smartphone almost a decade ago. They smacked an OLED on those things, and you know, the moment you got an OLED, you could never go back to an IPS display. The deep blacks, the contrast, colors that pop, it's all just too yummy to let go, okay? Cyberpunk looked amazing with those neon lights and the darkness of Night City. Generally speaking, thriller, horror, sort of adventure games with that atmospheric setting would look really nice on an OLED, like Stalker 2 even, or Alan Wake 2. There is one thing that frustrates me like crazy on the Legion, and that is no biometric login. No facial login, no fingerprint login. The 7th generation of the Legion 3 years ago had fingerprint login. You don't go backwards. This is basic stuff. It's almost idiotic. Even handhelds have fingerprint logins now. Come on. In comparison, the Area-51, yes, has facial login. Speaking of idiotic, I think the bezels on the Area-51 are incredibly thick. And check this other thing out on the Area-51. It's cool, but it kind of isn't. If you look closely on the function keys, you'll see F7 has an icon of a B-2 stealth bomber. How wicked is that? Apparently, it's called the stealth key. Press it and it turns all the RGB external lights off, and it sets the keyboard to a plain white color, and it dials down the performance to a low medium setting, and it tunes it up for productivity, for longer battery life, so on and so forth. It's very convenient, sounds good. But when you take a step back a bit and then you kind of realize that this key basically turns it into a thick, heavy, old Dell business laptop. Maybe that is what it is underneath. Alienware, a pumped up Dell Latitude. From the outside though, yeah, it's pretty dramatic. Feels like it does have some alien DNA. Hold on, things aren't as bleak. I forgot to mention the trackpad though. Check out the RGB color waves built into that trackpad. It looks really trippy and it looks really cool. Let's see, 2 problems again. Number 1, as I mentioned before, the Alienware Command Center software makes it very difficult to customize it to your needs. You can set it to any color you want, and I think it does a good job in replicating that color. The other thing is that it has a timeout. So when you're not using it, like after a few seconds, it kind of turns off. And I think you probably might be using a mouse a lot with it. So, you know, the feature kind of loses its spark rather quickly as well. I should also talk about keyboard. The Area-51 comes with that Cherry MX low-profile mechanical keyboard, just like how it did on the outgoing X16. but this one seems to have a longer travel distance. Naturally, it's probably one of the clickiest keyboards you will ever find on a laptop. Some of you might be into that. Sure, it's satisfying, but over long typing sessions, there's this fatigue that builds into my fingers, probably due to the aggressively snappy nature of each key. I know a lot of you love mechanical keyboards. It's all the rage, but I don't think it's for everyone. On the other hand, the classic time-tested membrane switches on the Legion. These guys have been pulling a page from the IBM ThinkPad playbook for quite a while now. So these guys know a thing or two about crafting the perfect typing experience for a wide and diverse range of low self-esteem corporate slaves to brighten up their day. This keyboard here is probably their best work yet. At least for a gaming laptop. It's not clicky, it's not loud, it's not fancy. There's this thump to each keystroke, and the spacing between the keys even, like, great typing accuracy. I felt very little fatigue when I was typing out the script for this video. It's like I'm typing on really high quality solid pieces of rubber that was built for some sort of a space station. Love this keyboard, right? Really, really do. Now the trackpad on the Alienware looks cool, like it's high on something nasty. The trackpad on the Legion looks as exciting as a burnt up lump of coal, but it feels much nicer to use. The clicks are shallower, they're tighter. The click is a little bit more dignified. It's got more bass in it in comparison to the really tinny clickiness in the Area-51. Like, it feels more childish in comparison. Interestingly, the Area-51 comes with the first a 4K webcam, and the Legion is stuck at a 1080p webcam, which is again pretty 3 years old. I was expecting a lot for the webcam on the Area-51 naturally, but when you put the results side by side, I honestly don't see a massive difference on the Area-51. That's just my observation. See for yourself. Now let's put an end to the mystery and see how much performance varies between these two devices with very similar hardware. Just a very quick reminder, if you find yourself enjoying my content so far, please do consider liking and subscribing, and also leave your thoughts in the comments. Would love to hear from you. Just as a baseline, all the benchmarking I did was all on 1600p, so 2.5K resolution. For the most part, I stuck to the highest quality settings across all the games, like the highest graphical fidelity, and I played around with the DLSS on or off settings. Similarly, ran tests with ray tracing on, ray tracing off. But I kept the frame generation setting off. I still find that to be a little bit gimmicky because of input lag. So what you would be seeing up on screen now would be a range of different games using different settings, different ray tracing settings, different upscaling settings, and then those are compared side by side between the Alienware and the Legion 7. So feel free to pause the video here and, just let all of this information sink in. Honestly, upfront, I thought the Alienware might just outperform the Legion by a very small, negligible margin, based on the bulkier thermal engineering on the Alienware. Better thermals equals better wattage consumption equals better frames per second. To my surprise, though, it was the other way around, where the Legion found itself outperforming the Alienware. In most cases, I think in only Far Cry 6 and in Cyberpunk with ray tracing turned off is where the Area-51 slightly outshined the Legion. But for the most part, if I average all of these differences out, the Legion has a 3 to 4% gain over the Area-51. Now wait, it gets worse for the Area-51, because the most fascinating thing I recognized was how incredibly quiet, like substantially quieter, the Legion was in comparison to the Area-51. I think my head might explode. How can this be? How can this be? The thinner, lighter, and now even quieter Legion is outperforming the thick and heavy and inconvenient and loud Area-51. I just can't explain it. Like, what was all the fuss about with the Area-51? What is happening here? So I could have just concluded it, but I thought a little bit more research. I ran a Black Myth Wukong benchmark, a very demanding title, by the way, running the new Unreal Engine 5 with the settings all maxed out, and ran that benchmark for 3 hours straight on both devices simultaneously, side by side. So the first thing that I checked after running this benchmark for more than 3 hours were surface temps. You would think that because the Legion is providing better performance, but at the same time being quieter because of lower fan speeds, it might feel like typing on a smoldering campfire. But you would be wrong, because it feels more like sliding your hands in a toaster that has been switched off and put in a refrigerator overnight. Because this is probably the coolest feeling laptop I have ever used. The wrist areas were actually room temperature, not even a degree warmer. The keyboard area still felt slightly warm, like the keys itself felt very comfortable. And it's not like there are cutouts underneath the keyboard like we've seen on the M16 and on the Razer blades that would keep like the left and right areas of the keyboard cool. No, that's not the case at all. All the air is completely exhausted all from the back. So am I losing my mind? I decided to check under the thermal camera, and yeah, the wrist areas were definitely cooler. If you look at just the keyboard deck, the hotspot indicator on the thermal cam revealed the Legion was a little hotter than the Area-51, but to the end user, I think you would find the Legion to be more comfortable than the Area-51. Mind blown all over again. Remember, thinner, quieter, lighter, better looking in some ways, better display, cooler now even, for the same price. I didn't want to call it at that, so I thought more research. Perhaps there's something going on underneath that we need to investigate. How much is that CPU and GPU sweating between the two? When I pulled the logs from both of these systems after that benchmark, I found that the GPU temp on the Legion averaged 86 degrees across that 3-hour cycle, and the Area-51 averaged 76 degrees. That is a huge difference. And that even shows in clock speeds, because both the systems at the start of the test started at around 2550 megahertz, and after 3 hours the Alienware was sitting close to 2520 megahertz, and the Legion was sitting closer to 2450 megahertz. Even with the CPU temp, the Legion was averaging around 98 degrees, and the Alienware averaged 93 degrees. Again, substantial difference. So how come the Area-51 still fall behind in performance? Did they have a lower wattage forced on this device perchance? The Legion showed the GPU averaged about 159 watts during this test, and the Area-51 averaged around 170 watts. So what the hell is going on? The Area-51 should have been outperforming the Legion. I can't say I ran the benchmarks wrong, because I ran all of the benchmarks again multiple times on both devices just to make sure I've got consistent results across the two, and yet this anomaly stands. Either the tracking software HW Info is all out of whack, or Legion has found a way to bribe the frame rate counting algorithm. So I could have just concluded everything at that, but then I thought a little bit more research. I recorded the performance on both these devices for a Black Ops 6 multiplayer game, Nuketown, just to see in the short term how much the performance differences vary. First things first, the frame rate on the Legion was still slightly higher. That was also the case in the benchmark. And the Legion also averaged slightly higher clock speeds than the Area-51, just 60 megahertz. Is not a big difference. Interestingly though, the Area-51 was pulling about 67 watts more power into the 5080 GPU compared to the Legion. And finally, the GPU temps themselves, they were both pretty consistent between the two devices, averaging around 80 degrees. But I have to emphasize these were both short-term tests. A multiplayer match between the two lasts about 15 minutes. Maybe when it comes to long-term abuse, and if you're into very long gaming marathons, you like keeping the device up and running throughout the day, all the time, the Area-51 might just better stand the test of time in comparison to the Legion. Sure, the subject might require more research, but for now, at this stage, based on what I know, that's the only thing I can conclude. Only time can tell. Although these two are performance machines and they are relatively thicker and heavier in comparison to your regular productivity laptops, discussions around battery life is kind of moot, but still I went ahead and sort of wanted to check how both of these systems manage power considering identical hardware. So I have the general 1080p YouTube stream test where I run a Top Gear video on loop for the entire night on both of these devices. The screen brightness set about half, around 250 nits for both, and the sound volume roughly about 40%. And the RGB settings turned down to a minimum. For example, the Alienware was on its stealth setting, and the Legion was on its lowest sort of RGB setting as well. And both of these devices had their integrated GPUs set to on, and the dedicated graphics, the RTX 5080s, turned off to maximize battery life. So the Area-51 managed to spit out 2 hours and 20 minutes only on those settings, which honestly turned out to be slightly better than the Alienware X16, the outgoing one. But yikes! The MSI Stealth that I tested recently with that Ryzen 7 CPU gave me close to 6 hours. Sure, these are X CPUs in here, but still. I also should mention here that the charging brick that comes with the Legion, 400 watts of it, is about the size of an elephant's heart or a small dog. So it's going to be quite a lump to carry. In comparison, the Area-51's charging brick at about 360 watts is, well, still large, but relatively feels more portable compared to the Legion. The Legion with the same CPU and GPU under the same test conditions lasted about 3 hours and 40 minutes. 80 more minutes than the Area-51. That is huge. The Area-51 is sending power to 3 SSDs rather than 2 SSDs on the Legion. But I feel with what I know and understand so far, it might just be down to software, just how well both of these are configured and tuned up. And as we've seen, there's more evidence of abuse on the Alienware side rather than on the Legion side. So let's conclude. Considering all that we've learned so far, which one of these would I buy? I'm kind of easily leaning towards the Legion. You might have got onto that a bit. Sure, I absolutely hate that the Legion does not come with any biometrics or that it doesn't have a full-sized SD card slot, but otherwise, the color blasting OLED and the performance gains too, even at the short-term level, more portable in dimension and weight, quieter, cooler, need I say more? And also feels nice to interact with, like to hold, to touch, to type, all of those things. As colorful a personality I am, I still prefer the rather vapid, blacked out look of the Legion compared to the Area-51. There's this sort of difficult to explain personality X factor on the Legion. It just lands a punch onto Alienware's face so effortlessly, while the Alienware is trying so hard with the mysterious steel colored look and that see-through panel underneath, its over-the-top thermal design, the lights in the intake vents, and it's like the Legion just stands there knowing that it has nothing to prove. It's not making any fuss about it at all. Yes, a major technical advantage that the Area-51 has, the 3 SSD slots. It is definitely something worth buying it for, but for everything else, I would stick with the Legion. So that's about it. For those of you who stuck it out all the way to the end of this video, I'm really grateful. Thank you very much for watching. Please be sure to subscribe and like, and I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time.